Good morning. I'm with Avi Rotman from Israel, from Yaffa, Israel, and we'd like to discuss Israeli affairs. What's happening in Israel today? How do the people on the street feel? What's the politics of Israel? And first, let me introduce Avi Rotman to you. That's my code name. Hi, would you please tell us your background, Avi, and why you've become an activist in Israel?
First of all, hey Joyce, and thank you for hosting me. So a few words about for myself. As you mentioned, I live in Jaffa for the last 20 years. I grew up in the Galilee. I raised two beautiful teenager girls here in Jaffa, and in the last 20 years, I provide my livelihood through the tourist industry. I'm a tour guide and I have a small tour company. Um, and I started to be involved, I think, in politics in a more active way uh, when Netanyahu cases, his legal cases, came to life, and civil protests started to pop out throughout Israel, resenting the fact that our prime minister is being accused in criminal affairs, including bribery, breach of confidence, and fraud. And ever since then, the protests evolved when the events in Israel took different shapes, from protesting against Netanyahu personally. The protest is focused today on the hostages release, and I think also in growing voices in Israel calling to end the war. Uh,
How many people do you think at this point in time are really against the war and for a diplomatic solution that's being proposed in the Middle East today?
So I think we can divide Israel in that regard into three major groups, and they are more or less equal in size, and it's an estimate. You have one third of Israelis that are in favor of the continuation of the war, and they are basically the base or the electorate of this current government. And the other two-thirds are in favor of ending the war uh, in exchange for a deal that will bring all the hostages back. But it gets tricky. But when you look at those two-thirds, you can divide it to two, while one-third of Israelis are calling to end the war only in order to bring the hostages back, meaning that if the hostages will be back tomorrow, they will be in favor of the continuing the war in Gaza. While the last third, which me among them, are people that are calling not only to end the war in order to bring the hostages back, but ending the war because this is the right thing for Israel in the region to happen, and it's the best way to fight the radical forces that's still around. But it's only one third.
It's only one third. And the politicians, I read that Yair Lapid is meeting with Netanyahu uh, today, and I'm wondering what are they discussing, and who really does Yair Lapid represent?
So that's a great question. So Yair Lapid, first of all, officially he holds the position of the head of the Israeli opposition, which is a title in Israel that comes with a package of responsibility and access to information and etc. So it's important to mention it in regard to Lapid. Lapid is a centric politician in Israel. He ran on a centric platform, which before the war, by the way, meant that he hardly touched any issues that touching the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and focusing more on economical and social issues. And on those issues, Lapid will be seen very liberal. So, for instance, he will be in favor for separation of religion and state, LGBTQ rights, and etc. He will be on the left. left side. But when it touched to security and the conflict, the center voters that voted to Lapid are very similar in their opinion to Netanyahu in even more right position in Israel. I think since the war started, the center politician get drained. So their electorate is being fragmented, and people that used to vote to Lapid are now leaning or to vote more left or to vote more right.
Interesting.
Uh,
So you're getting the extremes. What
Correct.
what is in your view, and people who are like you, and I assume you represent the more liberal parties who are looking for muscular diplomacy in Israel, how likely is that to happen within the next few days? Or do you think it'll be weeks and months before you know about the fallout from the Trump visit to the Middle East?
Yeah, I think it might be in a few days and it could be a few weeks, but in the end, Israel is in a tight spot in many angles. But as for your question, we're first of all in a tight spot because it seems that Israel government direction is a complete contradiction to President Trump direction in regard of the Middle East. While Trump is trying to promote agreement and ending conflict, Israel is the one insisting of keeping the war going. So this is one corner. We don't know how Trump will move forward. So it's pretty clear he wants the war to end. It's pretty clear the Israeli government don't want. The question if Trump is going to try to twist Israel's hand in order to do so, or he will just leave us behind. We'll say, you do whatever you want in Gaza. I got the deals that I want to be promoted in the Middle East. I reshaped the region, and now I'm living. And if Israel wanna get stuck in Gaza for years ahead, it's not my problem. And in this case, there is a question if he will continue giving Israel tremendous financial support. This week came out some numbers, and it seems that from the cost of the military costs of the war, was paid off by the US in more than 70% of the cost, and it's close to $25 billion in ammunition, military equipment, fuel, and etc. that the US has supplied to Israel without Israel have to pay for it. So this is, yeah, please.
I guess my question would be, how would it affect you if the United States was no longer involved and Israel had to assume the entire burden of
So
the war?
it's interesting because the one back to the 3/3 of the way of dividing the Israeli electorate, the 1/3 that support the continue of the war and support Netanyahu and his government are also big advocating to reduce the Israeli dependency on the U.S., especially because scenarios like this. Their argument is that Israel has enough money and enough capability to give up the U.S. support to Israel in order to reduce the ability of the U.S. to twist Israel's hand in the case that our interests contradicts. They might continue escalate the tone towards the US and saying that we basically don't want the money. Now, in general, I would accuse the Israeli right in short-term sight. It's true that Israel could sustain this economical blow for the next seen future. The question, what will be the long-term effect? And like many other populist governments, they spreading out checks, and someone else down the road will have to pay to cover it.
Right, right.
Mm.
Which is what's happening all over with this new authoritarian bent that we're seeing. Uh, they're
Please, yeah.
they're
And
creating problems where we don't really need the human problems to begin with.
correct. They also feel that they don't have the needs to expose the truth to the general people. So, for instance, how much the wars cost. how much it will cost to seize permanent long-term control over Gaza, where that money is going to come from, what will be the effect on Israel. All of this is very, very complicated. It doesn't fit into the Twitter feed that they are constantly sending to their electorate. So while their electorate thinking that all is fine and we can sustain it, we can get break from the US if we don't see eye to eyes and etc., that the reality is much more complex, and we will pay for it, not only financially, but also in other aspects. And I think the last few days indicates pretty clear where the direction is heading if Israel will continue insisting keeping the war going, while everyone around us are calling to end the war.
I have a few last questions. Uh, you have your own Cutter Gate in Israel, and Qatar is playing, it seems to me, both sides. At one hand, they were financing Hamas, and now all of a sudden there is peace. Uh, I had a question when they released the American Israeli, who I was happy to have released. Why, with all of their power, couldn't they have released all the hostages in a good faith moment?
You're asking about Qatar, why Qatar didn't push the relief. Okay. So first of all, it's completely true. Qatar was funding Hamas roughly for the last decade under Israel approval. It's an arrangement between Israel and Qatar that allow Qatar to funnel in funds on a monthly basis to Hamas, that allow the organization to accumulate a lot of power and capability. But it's also important to remember that it's also indicated Israel and Qatar has an open channel of communication. Benjamin Netanyahu described Qatar as a complicated or complex entity. There is many in Israel that address Qatar as an enemy state. In Israel, you need an official decision for it, and Qatar is not officially an enemy state of Israel. But it's been considered definitely in a security level as someone that play very, very close with our enemy. If you As for your question of why Qatar didn't pressure Hamas to release all the hostages, Hamas see the hostages as their insurance. Hamas was willing to release one soldier mainly because they still have in their hand 58 other Israelis. Giving up all the Israeli as a sign of good gesture or etc. will disarm Hamas with the only leverage they have over Israel. I think the main reason that they released Idan Alexander was to portray Israel as the side that is unwilling to sit around the table. It's a message to Trump. Trump came to the area. The question is who he is going to blame for the collapse of the negotiation that he is trying to promote to end the war. Hamas and Qatar, by playing this card of voluntarily almost releasing one of the hostages as a sign of good faith, is now pushing the ball to the Israeli side. And as you already know, Israel is saying, no, we are unwilling to end the war. And that's portray Israel as the stubborn one. It's not the radical, terrible terrorist organization that is called Hamas, but it's Israel that is the barrier. It's putting Israel in a very, very uncomfortable position regionally and also with the relationship with the US. So it's a smart move by them. But there is a limit. They're willing to release one. If you want more, let's sit and talk.
So, in your point of view, or the Israeli public's point of view, what do you think is possible to break the stalemate?
As long as this Israeli government sits, there won't be a break in the stalemate. The break will come when there will be a sign or fear that the government is about to collapse. And then Netanyahu knows that he has no government in any way, so maybe it's better for him to promote the deal and coming towards the election with the images of the hostages coming back, and he potentially is the one responsible for their return, or at least that's how we will spin it. But as long as this government continue to sit, this will be the direction.
Interesting. Well, I guess we have to wait and see what happens, how much pressure will be brought to bear on this government, and what they will think of as a way to save face and get the hostages back, and still somehow punish Hamas, because what they did cannot be allowed to stand, nor do you need them to be militarized, within kilometers of your border.
But it's interesting that you say it, because you can see how intertwined the political and the security one. As long as the war continue, it's allowing the government to constantly bend and twist the event in order to portray them as a way that will affect the Israeli general public opinion. Meaning the war or the continuous state of an emergency in Israel, giving this populist government a greater power to influence the general public opinion. Although in many cases, the incentive of doing those moves is not security-based, but political-based. And we can see it now with this insistence of continuing in the war is being portrayed definitely in the protest movement as a political decision and not a security one. It's a political one because it keeps the coalition alive. While Israel interests might be different, the coalition interest is to keep the war going because it will ensure them staying in power.
Right, because realistically, I would think, one, if you had a true understanding of what led to the events of October 7th, you would, two, be able to control the security of the state, since it is only a few kilometers away. It just requires vigilance and building up uh, whatever security you need along the Gaza border. And people then can go about living. And I would think that once people go about living, they would not want war.
Correct. Again, I think the war is being debated in Israel as though it's there is almost not a question if we need to continue fighting. The question if we need to stop in order to bring the hostages back. But I think there is also deeper. The populace makes us think that the only way to tackle Hamas is through military option, which is not true. Israel already did the military option. Now, with the change of the course of event in Gaza, the next step needs to be a diplomatic solution, similar to what we saw in Lebanon. So there was few months of fighting. In the end, there is an agreement. The agreement represents the new power structure that the military operation created. That's the idea. But in Gaza, we see that Israel is insisting again and again to use only military means in order to get its objective. We completely refuse any negotiation of an agreement, any rise of moderate force that can push Hamas away, any long-term thinking about the millions of people living in Gaza Strip and the fact that they are all displaced, they have no home, with a catastrophic death toll, that it's a hotbed for terrorist organizations just to continue recruiting more and more combatants to fight for their behalf. And after saying all of that, we didn't even mention the moral price that Israel is paying for the war and the insane price of civilian losses among the Palestinian population.
Well, It would seem to me at this point, uh, Israel has reordered the Middle East, not Trump, because Israel reordered it by weakening Hezbollah so that they are a non-issue, by dealing with Syria, and the next step would be an alliance. So, and also weakening Iran so that they are really a non-player at this point. Uh, it would be worthwhile for Israel to be at the table.
I completely agree. I will say a few things. First of all, the four major forces in the Middle East, and what you're describing is indicate a shift in the balance between the forces. And the four forces are you have the moderate Sunni country, you have the Islamic Shia Republic of Iran, so radical Shiite. You have political Islam Sunnis, so those are Turkey and Qatar, that thinks that Islam need to be part of the political structure of countries in the Middle East, and you have Israel. And what we see happen in the war is that Israel was able to push Iran, the radical Shia power, out of the Middle East. So out of their holding in Syria, Lebanon, and potentially the Palestinian Gaza Strip and West Bank, and into the vacuum that was created, the other forces are trying to reassemble a new structure. And you see that Saudi is the one that harvests most of the fruit, and they represent the moderates. Sunni, they will be now the rising force in the Middle East, according to Trump visit. While Turkey and Qatar also get a piece of the cake. Iran, of course, is not around the table. They got hammered in the war. The sad reality is that Israel is also not next to the table. While Israel did the job of eroding the ability of Iran to continue influencing the region in a very, very radical and negative way. And instead of being at the table where all the goodies are being distributed, now that the war up north is over, Israel is not even invited. And the reason we are not invited is our insistence of continue keeping the war in Gaza alive. And again, the reason of keeping the war in Gaza alive is not security, but political.
Right.
And
Well,
Israel is missing a huge opportunity for the narrow political need of a populist, corrupt government that is lying to its people.
well, hopefully we can make a dent in that, and people will continue to discuss the ramifications of continued war. And perhaps they would come to the agreement that if it was good enough for Lebanon and it was good enough for Iran, it's now good enough to make a deal here with Hamas.
I agree. I will say one last thing to end, and to connect it to the protest movement. But if we said that we started to protest or because of Netanyahu criminal cases, and we continue to protest in order to bring the hostages back, I think what is now happening is more and more people are going out to the street calling to end the war. That's the important thing. That the release of the hostages will come as part of it. But the important thing is not only to bring the hostages back, but also to go out to the street and cry to end the war. And I think what we are going to see in the next few weeks and maybe few months, I hope it will be shorter, is that the issue of ending the war will take precedent. It will be the leading one, and that will be the dividing line between the Israeli voters, those who want to continue the war and those who want to end it.
Right. I think this is the opportunity where people really do have to come to a decision of how are they going to determine their lives going forward.
Right. I
Are
really
they
hope they join us at the streets.
right? Well, Hopefully, we will see a just end.
Amen.
Amen.
I sure believe that it will be a one in, and I think that our side will be the one with the upper hand. Um, and I really, really think that the rule of the Israeli right over the politics in Israel that lasts for a few decades now is very close to its end.
Well, I think that's a good thing. I
I
think
think so too.
I think so too. We will be a more just and a more equal society when that happens.
Yeah, one of the slogans at the protest is, and I'm free translating, "You have broken, and we'll fix it." You broke Israel, and we're coming to fix it, and we'll build a better Israel.
And I think that's the right attitude, actually, that it is broken, the realization that it's broken, but it can be fixed. And
Completely.
and it could be it can be the beacon that Technion and so many people felt that that is Israel's role in the Middle East. And it
Complete.
still
Uh, uh,
is the
by,
beacon.
by the way, you just need to read sections from the Declaration of Independence and see the vision that Israel was founded on and see how far we got drifted away from it. You have sentence of reaching our hand to all the people in the region in call for peace and prosperity, no discrimination on on gender, religious or ethnicity, and etc. etc. Um, and Israel drifted very very far from it. It seems to me that we almost being seen as a radical force in the region, not a moderate. And
So
it's
and
yeah,
and it will be time to go back to where you are a strong force and also a strong force for good, like you've always been.
I
Where
think so too.
where you're not looking for wars. You're looking to get out of wars.
Correct.
You just want to be left in peace and to develop solutions that affect positively all of mankind. I still think you're the center of what, 8 Nobel Prize winners for a small country. I think that's impressive.
Israel has a lot to offer, there is no doubt. But I think what we losing or missing is that the way forward is through cooperation. Not through isolation. So the idea is to be interconnected and interdependent. So to work together with the other moderate force in the region in order to provide better security to the region, but also to provide better economy, better access to technology, tourism, trade. There is so much that could be done if we'll be willing to play along with our neighbors. And for a very long time, we were being told that they don't really want to play with us. And we know it's not true. Israel could have been at the table in Saudi Arabia 2 days ago. We were not there because we insisted not to end the war, not to go to a diplomatic solution that will resolve the problems in Gaza, and we prefer to continue chasing Hamas terrorists through the tunnels and alleyways of what left from Gaza.
Well, I think we should leave it there. Uh,
Pleasure.
the way Israel was founded is the way it needs to go back to those ways.
Completely.
And that's a diplomatic solution so that everyone lives in peace and cooperation.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Joyce.